On this week's episode of TalkStone,
HCT Tokyo and our first Hearthstone Master.
Our guest this week, Drew Higbee, Product Manager for Hearthstone Esports, joins us to chat about bringing back Hearthstone Global Games.
And as always, we present this week's well-played moment, some meme history, and our favorite question, Dan. Would you buy this deck?
Spoiler, no. Everybody get in here, let's break down all the esports action. Welcome to TalkStone, your premier source for all things competitive Hearthstone news and analysis. My name's Frodan.
And I'm TJ.
That's right, and we're back for another episode on this fantastic podcast. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Let's begin things off with the big elephant in the room, which is we have our first Hearthstone Master, at least for Masters Tier 1. And that's Hunterace from Norway, a player that we've been talking about for a long time now, ever since the 2018 season began.
Yeah.
And he's done it again. TJ, he went really deep in HCT Tokyo, landing at 3rd/4th place, top 4. Extremely impressive. 17-year-old kid. And this guy is just dominating a game that can't be held down. Like, how do you have this much dominance in a game like Hearthstone?
I don't know, but he just keeps doing it over and over again. He's just a fantastic player. He finds lines that nobody else finds. And even in his qualifying match, which was the quarterfinals against Naxx at HCT Tokyo, he went into that matchup. He got the worst draw for his lineup out of all the other players in the top 8.
Right.
It was a counter lineup, and that honestly, the air in the room and how the casters were casting and how the players were playing, or at least from Hunterace's side, it felt like a finals because there was that much on the line for him.
Right.
And it was just, he found some lines. He always continues to impress me with his Odd Paladin play, which is a deck that oddly no pun intended, becoming known for, I guess, because it's the one consistency in all of his tournament victories and such.
He's brought Odd Rogue a few amount of times.
Odd Rogue as well.
It's kind of like he has this interesting dynamic where he likes to play. Well, first of all, these decks are really good. I mean, people are kind of foaming at the mouth these days about how good Druid is. They're talking about Malygos Druid, Token Druid, Taunt Druid, and then, of course, TJ's Wacky Mill Druid that we talked about last week. There's all kinds of variations with Druid right now. And people are still climbing really high with, like, Spiteful Summoner Druid and mid-range Druid with, like, Injured Blade Master Savage Roar. Like, just really wonky stuff with Leroy Jenkins. But people kind of forget that Odd Paladin, Odd Rogue, Zoo Warlock, which is finally starting to have results on tournaments to back up its ladder performances.
Yep.
And Hunterace is changing it up just a little bit every single time. He kind of reminds me of Muzzy in that sense, where Muzzy, who also went to Tokyo, brought his own variation. He brought Tempo Rogue. I'm not a huge fan of that deck, but I can understand where his head's at in terms of trying to bring a more aggressive lineup. And that's also something that sticks out to me too, TJ. I'm sure we're kind of deviating a little bit from the topic, but just talking about Tokyo in general, it's kind of like the last pin in the to have a complete metagame, because everyone talks about how great this metagame is because it's slow, it's greedy. People can make these anti-greed decks that really punish things. People are playing really weird stuff: Test, Rogue, Overload, Shaman, Elemental Mage. I brought an Odd Warlock to Legend this past week too, and it's just really wacky stuff. But aggro, for a long time, people said was really bad.
Yes.
But now aggro strategies are working, TJ. So in the end, we really have everything at the table that's well represented. It's not just 1 or 2 aggro decks. There's like 5 or 6 that had powerhouse performances this weekend at Tokyo.
Yep. And HCT Tokyo also, because it was just a 16-player event, the qualifiers were online. We got to see sort of a concentrated effect of that meta, and almost there was every different variety of lineup represented there. There was the heavy control. There was the heavy combo anti-control, which actually did also make it to the top 4 with Machamp, who we'll talk about more in depth later as well, as we were impressed by him, who got 3rd, 4th. Egg Hunter, Quest Rogue, Shadowwalk, Shaman, Cube Warlock. And then we had aggro, multiple variations of aggro in the top 4, mind you.
Which we should talk about.
Yes, we'll talk about that as well. But it just kind of, like you said, put a pin on the whole, which wood is the golden age of metas.
11.2 was the golden age.
Okay.
TJ required a couple of nerfs, but it's really fascinating how the community has been clamoring about how the meta game really wants to open up with rotation, and we finally got that. It did take a little bit. It was a bumpy road to get there, but when finally Witchwood hit its groove, man, it is my favorite meta game of all time, TJ. I was kind of saying it's a top contender.
Yeah.
You talk about League of Explorers. You talk about when Naxx Rammus and GVG were out. There's like these interesting decks that were out back then, Patron Warrior meta, etc. None of those live up to what the Witchwood has brought to us, and I'm really looking forward to Boomsday, which we're not talking about because I know everyone's really happy about the live stream and all the expansion now, so the theory crafting. But if we can, for some people who want to acknowledge the past and recognize what's happening, because the thing is, TJ, there's one of my favorite quotes from TV was made by Ed Helms when he said, "Don't you ever wish that you can remember that the good days, or you're in the good days before the good days ever in the past."
Was that in the final episode of The Office? Or
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that. And I totally messed up the quote, by the way. But he's like,
no,
I wish there was a way you can recognize that you're in the good old days before they became the good old days.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what's going on with the Witchwood meta right now. I really want to take a second to appreciate what's actually happened, both on ladder and in tournaments. Because the fact is, the tournament and ladder meta have been having a large amount of divergence recently. In the past year and a half or so, ladder is a completely different environment than tournaments, largely because of hidden information versus open, and then controlled bans and deck list lineups versus not. And now it's just interesting to see how it has completely evolved beautifully in different ways.
Yeah,
I
agree.
Sorry to go on a rant, TJ.
No, that was so beautifully put, Dan.
Thank you.
And this is one of the only expansions that I'm still experimenting with this meta. How am I going to have time?
The deck that you have for us at the end of this show, TJ, already has blown my mind. I didn't even know it was possible.
It is quite lit. But trying to bring it back, Hunterace, 150 points, first Hearthstone Master. The first tier of Hearthstone Master, of course, gets you invites to the monthly Masters tournaments, which we had Jay on the last episode, and he said we're still discussing how many players we need to have in Masters before that takes place.
Right.
Currently, it's leaning towards like 8, but could be sooner than that. Who knows?
Yeah, that's so funny because if we have these monthly cash prize tournaments for Masters players, Hunterace will win by default.
Yeah.
Currently, if the system holds.
When a second player qualifies, it'll just be a show match.
That's great.
That would be really funny. I push for the show match. We don't know yet. We'll see when the next player qualifies. Other players are still like 20 points behind him.
Who's the most likely candidate behind it? Is it Muzzy or is it Fino?
Fino or Board Control probably are the two that are next in line. We'll see if
Europe is killing it.
They are. The next 5 are all Europe. There's Muzzy and Shaxi from APAC, who Shaxi and Muzzy both picked up a few points from Tokyo.
Rivius did pretty well too.
Rivius as well, but he kind of slacked at the beginning of this season. He was the points
he told
leader.
Me he was taking a little bit of a break in Seoul just to ease up on his intense schedule.
Yeah, which makes sense. You need to average in order to hit 3-star master. You need to average 66.6 points per season to hit the 200 mark. Repeating, of course. Hunterace is averaging a little over 75 points a season, so he'll hit. If he continues on this trend, he'll definitely hit 3-star master. But with that said, Hunterace did finish 3rd, 4th, so we can talk about the winner of HCT Tokyo, which was Hinaya from Japan, local player taking the Japanese tour stop.
That's huge.
It is. We've had a few other local players. We had Race take Copa early on in the season.
Be Quiet took HCT Germany.
HCT Germany. He was a German player. Yep. Yeah. There was
Jack Attack for Sydney.
Yeah, he's from New Zealand.
Yeah, people usually pair A and Z together, Australia and New Zealand, so it's kind of felt like an appropriate hometown victory. But then started Europe's dominance at that point, right? Because Hunterace went to Seoul and won, and then you saw Odemian win Canada or Toronto rather.
Which Hunterace was the runner-up.
I mean, there was some hometown resurgence when Teray was able to win HCT Oakland. I feel like from California. But overall, it felt like for a while Europe was just starting to take over like we've expected them to, right? The law of large numbers. Over time, statistics play out to whoever is favored over the multiple players games, and Europe's just been doing super well. So, it's interesting to see Japan really rise up and hold strong. Now, granted, for these kinds of tournaments, they have regional qualifiers. So we expect more Japanese players or more players from that region/continent to be represented. So it's not surprising that there's a strong likelihood for these Japanese players to win.
Yeah.
That being said, We can't emphasize enough, and I'm going to be saying this all year round, TJ. This, in my opinion, is the year of Asia Pacific, and more specifically, the year of Japan. I think Japan has always been improving the results ever since the very beginning, since we've seen Matsun in 2016 winter season, which kind of kicked off HCT Open Circuit as we know it. Kind of riding all that wave. You had B787, you have Treads Red, you have Wu Ya,
Taco.
You have we have all these great Japanese players kind of rising up, each with their own different story, and some of them are really fun to listen to, and they do documentaries for it. I think Japan once again will show in 2018 going to 2019 why they are a country to be reckoned with. It's not just about Korea. It's not just about Taiwan or Singapore or Malaysia, some of these countries we used to see.
Yeah.
It's really going to be about Japan in the future.
My boy Tansoku. Don't forget about Tansoku. And, of course, Japan has had a huge culture for card games in the past as well. Almost every card game catches on there at some point or another.
Yeah.
Even in like Magic the Gathering, they had a lot of people who have won major events. I'm not too privy on the history, but they're on the rise, and I would expect to see more Japanese players make big splashes. But to talk about Hunaya's lineup a little bit, he did bring an aggro lineup, but he had a mid-range hunter.
Oh yeah.
So Token
What's
Druid,
old is new again.
Token Druid, Odd Rogue, Heal Zoo, and mid-range hunter. And his run really goes to show the power of just curving out with Crackling Razor Maul. It was. He had some really interesting spots. He played with Deathstalker Rexar really well. That was one of the things that I enjoyed about his play over the course of the weekend. It's one of the most skill-testing aspects of Hunter right now is to when to turn the corner between I'm not going to kill my opponent, so I need to transition to Deathstalker Rexar, and then maximizing efficiency with your zombies, which is a tough thing to do.
Oh yeah, I mean Rexar. I said this I think one time on broadcast with Kibler, but Deathstalker Rexar is the closest thing you can see just from one card on how play styles exist in Hearthstone.
Yeah.
Because there's 6 choices that you can make every single time you hero power, and then there's the choice of when you play it versus not. So you end up having a lot of differences in people's ideologies. People usually pick tempo-oriented ones, like pick cheap stuff, and then you have some people who decide to gamble a little bit and try to take bigger stuff because they recognize they need to have those big swing turns with the poisonous and the bloat bat, for example. So you have all these interesting choices turn over turn. And what's so interesting about the mid-range hunter pick was that this has actually happened already in the Witchwood meta with Hunterace winning HCT Seoul. He brought a mid-range hunter aggressive lineup. And the reason why is, once again, the metagame has completely cycled. Where it was because it got too greedy and became too much about Shutter Walks. I mean, for crying out loud, we saw Quest Priest make the top 8. Legitimately. And it's Dakrivius bringing a Quest Priest lineup, which you kind of mentioned Hunterace lined up against him, which was the worst possible head-to-head he could get. Quest Priest is so anti-aggro.
Yeah.
That's the entire
He banned it.
He banned it, of course.
Yeah.
But and Hunterace was able to win, so that's impressive. But that's kind of the state of the metagame where you can take advantage of these greedy lists by playing a traditional mid-range hunter, which has been proven time over time to be able to be a very viable pick both in ladder and now in tournaments. People are saying, well, yeah, this is a free-to-play budget deck that Disguised Toast used to get a legend on a free-to-play account last year. You can still bring it to the highest level of competition, and if you play correctly and well and optimally as best you can become a tournament winner yourself.
And also, anti-aggro strategies don't do as well against mid-range hunter as they would, say, against Odd Paladin.
Yes,
right?
That's true.
I'm thinking a lot about Malagos Druid, where Zoo and mid-range hunter, the matchups are so much better than the Odd Paladin because spreading plague is so much less effective because you push through with a bunch of
3 to 5 attack.
3 to 5 attack minions instead of a board full of 1/1s. You have a couple of chunky minions, which is what Zoo does pretty well also. So it kind of fits that mold. Token Druid, granted, does have a lot of the small stuff, but it can also just get online really quickly, and Savage Roar and Branching Pass allows it to push through. So I really like that direction that his aggro lineup went as opposed to the aggro lineups that we've seen in the past.
Right.
But then as we move down to second place, we have a completely different type of aggro. This is kind of the all-in aggro with one little twist. Alan, who represents Taiwan, but he lives in the U.S., still lives in the U.S., I believe. He participates at a lot of the NA tour stops. I've seen him at DreamHacks and all sorts. I've seen him play on NA Ladder.
I hung out with him at DreamHack
Yep.
Austin. In fact, I picked Alan to do well in the playoffs.
Yep.
And he went up to me at DreamHack Austin and apologized. He said he felt like, he said, like, I think you made a good pick in picking me. I think I just played bad. And I was like, oh, no. So I felt like a little bit, weirded out because I feel like maybe I psyched him out by picking him because he saw that. He's like, I wanted to play really well. He still plays Hearthstone competitively. So this guy is still traveling out. And, I mean, even though he represented Taiwan, he still kind of represents the Americas as well.
Alan had Spiteful Druid, Odd Face Hunter, Aggressive Temple, or Aggro Mage now. It's not even Temple Mage.
Yeah.
It's like Face Mage. And Miracle Rogue.
Yes.
So he was trying to go over the top. Spiteful Druid was, I think, the deck that was his downfall ultimately. It did really well all the way up until the finals where it kind of just fell flat on its face. But I love that lineup.
We'll take those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And second place for a young player who represented Taiwan, has a name followed by 6 numbers. Recipe for success.
Yeah. I mean,
I guess it was
might pick
5
Alan
numbers
again.
for Tom, but he just went 1 extra number. The full distance.
That's right. I would love it if our world champions the successor to each world champion, assuming they don't repeat, would be like adding 1 number. So if Hunterace wins, he should add 6 numbers, and someone else should add 7 numbers, and eventually it just becomes this crazy like weird tradition where it's like pi. So in 100 years, the Hearthstone world champion has 100 numbers after their name, which would be really funny.
Well, we can only hope. But as we wrap up HCT Tokyo, oh my gosh, we still have so much to talk about, Dan.
I know, we ran out of time.
Well, no, I want to talk about Machamp just a little bit.
Okay.
Machamp, a player who did really – he's kind of on the come-up. He barely missed out on tiebreakers, I believe, at the Asia Pacific playoffs this last event. I believe Sottle put him on the board. Someone put him on the board.
I think I put him on the board.
Did you put him on the board?
I believe I did. I think I put Alan. I think I put Machamp.
Okay, I'm usually the one who takes credit for Sottle's picks, but you're next on the line here in case he picked it.
I'm not sure. I
don't remember. He was on the board and he went 5-2 and missed out on tiebreakers, I believe. But he impressed me a lot. Some of his plays were super creative. He ended 3rd, 4th, same place as Hunterace,
right.
But
I think it was Subtle. Yeah.
Yeah, but Machamp was probably the player whose play impressed me the most. Lineups aside, he brought Egg Hunter, Quest Rogue, Shadowwalk Shaman, and Q Block. So sort of the anti-control combo style lineup. Probably one of the toughest lineups to pilot, with Quest Rogue and Cube Warlock being incredibly difficult at the highest level, especially with Cube Warlock's nerfs to their defensive capabilities.
Yeah.
But he really impressed me, and we're going to dive deeper later on him. No spoilers, but we're going to get into break down his performance a little bit more later.
Yeah. There's a Japanese documentary crew. They come out to every single ACT or championship rather.
Yes.
Largely because there's been Japanese players qualifying for it.
Every event.
And they do documentary stuff, and they usually interview some of the casters, and they interview me every now and then. And they asked me at this past summer championship, what's one Japanese player that you're looking out for? And I mentioned Machamp, and I think that it's not even just his play. He's unafraid to take risks.
Yep.
I one time saw him bring like a weird Jade Elemental Shaman back last year during the Ungoro event. I was like, what is this guy doing? Really cool deck builder. Some of his ideas are great, and he's also a fantastic player. And I think you're going to be hearing about him a lot. I'm picking him to be one of the breakout players from Japan for this year.
I would agree. I would definitely agree, especially after seeing his play and his performance at Tokyo. And then, of course, final mentions for HCT Tokyo. Dog once again.
Yikes.
Out early with 13th through 16th. Seems like he was enjoying Japan, so we can take that away.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of made a joke to him. I was just like, well, yeah, Dog sees the real big lines of play, which is he's not going to be in Tokyo all the time. So just have more time to maximize his vacation.
There you go.
Yeah, with some loved ones. I got to say, though, Dog and Muzzy dipping out early, I think this has to be a lineup defeat as opposed to their play. I don't think there's anything. Yeah, they can draw awkwardly. Yeah, things can not go the right, but I was just looking at their lineups. It just didn't seem like they were favored at all. But maybe they think differently because they don't necessarily agree with statistics, right? We look at the data and we're like, well, yeah, you just look like you lose on paper in every corner. But they're like saying, no, we know that from testing, this probably should perform a little bit better. So what do you think happened to you, Jay?
Well, Muzzy brought the weird, I don't even know what to call it, the Warlock Tempo Demon Warlock.
Yeah.
Demon,
is it the same
heavy
thing
Demon Zoo?
That
very
Flo
similar to
brought?
what Flo brought
Right.
with Skull Minari demons, but
just like a
rat
mid-range
catchers.
Zoo.
And he also brought like a different style of rogue. So I think for him it was just not enough. I don't know. Maybe he thought that the decks were better positioned. He was about 50-50 across the board in his matchups, but very little sample size for some of the decks that he brought. So it's hard without personal testing to see.
Yeah, and I think those decks tend to overperform on ladder, largely because they have the surprise factor on ladder.
Yeah. And Dog brought the good lineup from about a month ago. So it was Token Druid, Odd Paladin, Miracle Rogue, and Even Warlock, which...
Yikes.
That lineup has phased out quite a bit.
Yeah, it gets steamrolled by aggressive strategies.
It gets steamrolled by aggressive strategies. Even get some of the anti-control decks, it can struggle because you have Even Warlock, which can be a weak point in the lineup, as we've seen with most players cutting Warlock, or some players cutting Warlock, a lot of players moving to Zoo, and then the players that want to go full in on anti-control strategies bring Cube Warlock.
Yeah.
So Even Warlock's been phased out, so it just felt like Dog was a little bit behind on the current tournament meta. And maybe that lineup would have performed well at a tour stop month and a half ago, but things changed. So Dog's out early. And after what's probably about 2 hours, I think we're done with HCT Tokyo.
Yeah, let's go ahead and wrap up. Just there's a lot to unpack from Tokyo, but we're kind of summarizing sentences. Hunterace is killing it. Probably the player of the year so far after 2 seasons, and Tokyo shows his consistency again.
Yep.
Japan, once again, rising up and putting themselves on the map as a powerhouse country for the future of Hearthstone. Dog and Muzzy's lineups got to be careful. You can't just take too many big risks. But at the same time, we saw the aggressive strategies with bringing budget decks being able to succeed. So if you're a budget player and you want to enter tournaments, you have a place in this metagame and hopefully in the future as well. We have to get to see how Boomsday shakes things out. But I think there's a lot of cool things to explore with Witchwood, which goes down in my book as the best meta to ever exist in competitive Hearthstone.
Dan, I think that is a perfect way to wrap up HCT Tokyo. But before we move on, there's another conversation that I wanted to have with you. Hunterace has sort of brought up some conversations recently within the Hearthstone community about consistency in Hearthstone and what it means to have sort of the same players make it into like these top 16s, top 8s of tour stops all the time. You see them in everyone. Talk about Board Control, Casey, Hunterace, Muzzy, Just Saying, that crowd of players. And there's people on both sides of the fence. One is that these players are finally proving that over time, consistent players in Hearthstone are being rewarded, and it's showing the skill. But there's other players who are saying that this just shows that the players that go to the most events, of course, because they're at the most events, are going to have the most chances to make it to that top of the standings.
Okay.
I've
seen this debate.
You've seen this debate.
For about 5 years
Everybody
now.
has seen this debate since the beginning of time in Hearthstone.
Yes. How hard is it, or rather, the question is that you're asking, if I'm hearing correctly, is how can one be consistent at a card game like Hearthstone?
Yes.
At least competitively.
Yes.
Because I am very consistent, TJ. I hit that rank 5 floor, and I can't lose any stars.
Every season.
I am stuck every season. So that is consistency at its finest. This topic is actually fairly hard to just do in a few minutes. And I mean, I wish we could dedicate maybe a podcast or two to talk about it, but we can't. But the summary from both camps, from what I hear, is that one, people think that there's just a lot of variance and randomness in Hearthstone. It's hard to be consistent because it's not even necessarily about Hearthstone's fault. It's just, can you really determine who's a better player over the course of 2 or 3 games? You can't.
No.
It's very difficult. But then there's another portion of the community that feels like, well, there are people who are consistent because they're not only winning a lot, but they're doing different things, different plays, different deck lineups, different ideologies. Like, this is a good class. Some people bring something really wacky off the wall and they win. Like at Hunterace, he's innovating his lineup a little bit every single time and having success. It's not that he's just good at this metagame. He's doing it with aggro decks, control decks, combo decks, mid-range decks, etc. So those are the 2 people going head-to-head. The big question that I want to throw out is, why is this even important? Why is it important? People are comparing Hearthstone to a game like Overwatch or Heroes or StarCraft when they're like, well, yeah, this game doesn't have randomness or doesn't have this feature. It's like, well, Hearthstone's a different game completely. It's a different genre of games. Like, Hearthstone could technically fit as a board or strategy game if you poured it into a real life thing. It's not supposed to be, a real-time strategy game like StarCraft where how fast you play and how mechanical you are is the difference maker a lot of times. It's not. It's supposed to be the chance that at any given Sunday, anybody can be the victor, but you have to play your best at all times to maximize your chances. So why do people care so much about making it exactly like their favorite esport? I don't think that's important. And it's really interesting, too, because there's a lot of elitism that happens in gaming, which already is not a good mentality to have, in my opinion, but that's a different topic. But the fact is, they really care about these other esports that aren't Hearthstone to be like sports a lot of times. There's not everybody, but there's a huge camp of people that say, we want esports to be recognized mainstream like regular sports. And yet, the sports community has elitism towards esports, and then there's elitism within esports about this is an esport, this is because of random success. And there's people who are consistent enough to disprove those arguments. So for me, the fact that this argument even happens is kind of mind-blowing in itself. It's just like there's people who dedicate their lives to be competitive, and they're doing really well from it, and they're successful from it. Why? What else do we have to debate about it?
And we're deriving entertainment from it.
Yeah, they're deriving free entertainment. And it's like all they want to do is destroy people's hard-earned accomplishments. You only went, TJ, you only got a job because you showed up every day to work. You only got promoted because you had quality. And obviously, I'm strawmanning it. I'm being pretty flippant with that comparison. Yeah. It's not even a good analogy per se. And I'll let you respond to this in a sec, TJ.
Okay.
But my fundamental thing is like, why does it matter? Just appreciate something that's really hard to do being done. And that's kind of what games and recognizing and achievements is about. It's just these guys, yes, they travel across the world and week to week, and of course they get the most opportunities, but they're dedicating their lives, and they're proving against the odds that you can be consistent. That in itself is what's important at its core argument. I don't care about legitimacy in the eyes of one game versus another. I just care about some guy is really good at Hearthstone, which is really difficult to do.
Yeah, and I mean, even going deeper into the argument where we're talking about the other esports or real sports that you mentioned, underdogs exist, right? The best player, even in those things where the best player wins a vast, larger majority of the time, they don't always win. That's why you have underdog stories. That's why sometimes, the Warriors don't win in the NBA Finals, which we're not in that world yet. But it happens, and people are entertained by that as well. And
they are to an extent. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's like the Warriors and Cavaliers finals this year had significantly lower viewership, and it's largely because it's so predictable about what's going to happen. People felt like the entire season was out to waste. So there's somewhere in the balance, somewhere on the spectrum. At the very bottom is Hearthstone, where like anything could happen. At the very top, there's like StarCraft, where we know a Korean is most likely going to win a StarCraft World Championship.
Yeah.
So somewhere in the middle is where people want it to be. They're not saying it has to be one or the other, which is why the majority of people just want Hearthstone to be a little bit more consistent.
Yeah.
But there's people who are telling you that it is. It's just that a lot of the things are hard to see because in a game like Hearthstone, very candidly, it hides your mistakes a lot behind the fact that, like, okay, maybe you lost because of this one moment where you death gripped a random minion from your opponent's deck. But there's a lot of leading factors that, if that doesn't happen, that's what influences the game more often than not that people can't recognize.
Yeah, but no system is perfect, right? There's always going to be a single moment.
There's a flaw.
A single match where one player is going to be, or one team is going to be crowned. And whether that team is the best team, whether that player is the best player, it doesn't matter. What matters is that match. That guy's the world champion. This team are the world champions. And, that's why we have the Hearthstone Masters, is to recognize players like Hunterace who consistently perform over time. That's why we have a point system that rewards players that don't just win one tournament.
Yes.
Winning one tour stop doesn't automatically qualify you for the World Championship. You have to consistently perform over the course of a long periods of time. And then, of course, when the World Champion comes, that one match, that determines it. That's the World Champion. But it's the same across every other event. So I'm playing to the point of that even though, why is this argument happening? I'm playing to the point, well, it is happening.
Yeah, it is happening. And there's a lot of people who are, kind of like, outspoken against it, saying like this shouldn't be forced into an esport. But the fact is, a lot of people love watching Hearthstone. It's a very great spectator-friendly game. Some probably top of the esports industry in terms of being watchable and easy to follow. So that in itself already makes it a great spectator game.
And to kind of wrap up this conversation, because it won't have an end if
if
we don't have a wrap up.
I hope that they can at least take the best parts from this. Yeah. We definitely went too long.
Hearthstone is still a very young game, and in the realm of esports, is a very young esport. 5 years is our competitive history, and that's being generous. going back to the Innkeeper's Challenge at BlizzCon in 2013.
Right, where Artosis took down Kripparrian.
And with the nature of the game, it is a game where consistency over time is the thing that matters the most. I want to talk about when would be the right time for Hearthstone to have a Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because, part of the silliness of this discussion of whether or not Hearthstone's a legitimate esport is it doesn't matter. Let's talk about it in 5 years.
Yeah.
We'll see how history lines up. And right now, history has shown some players to just, be able to defy all probability and the odds. I personally think that at the 10-year mark, Blizzard should do a 10 inductee Hall of Fame ballot.
10 players.
Really cool, yeah. And they would send out ballots to a bunch of people, media, journalists, players, casters, internally as well. Who would be a candidate for your Hall of Fame if we did it right now today? Let's say we pick 5 players because it's year 5. Right?
5 players.
Yeah.
Maybe I can do 3 players.
Okay, 3 players so far.
3 players.
That's right, because HCT's only had 3 real years so far.
Yeah. Before that, it was the
2016,
HWC, Hearthstone World Championship, because it was just everything led up to the Worlds.
Right,
there was
nothing
in between.
3 years of HCT. We're in the middle of the third.
Okay.
Pick 3 players.
Hunterace would be guaranteed in, just because this is a monumental year for any player. Nobody's had this much success in a single year, I don't think.
In such a concentrated period.
Yeah. So Hunterace.
Okay.
Going back a little bit, I think Firebat.
Okay.
World champion. He came back the year after, won 2 Gfinities. Mm-hmm. Since then, when he does compete in tournaments and he tries hard, he's still a fantastic player.
Right. And
his mind for the game is still top notch, despite not being a super competitive HCT player. Right.
I like Firebat.
So Firebat. Oh, the third one is going to be tough. Wow.
All right.
Muzzy.
Okay, Muzzy would be one of my 3 as well.
Muzzy, even though he was at the World Championship last year and didn't have that great a performance, he doesn't have Firebat World Champion. He didn't have 3 tour stops not in a row, but 3 tour stops in a single year victories. He was in the talk for best competitive player for a long time before he ever won a tournament. He's won a few tournaments since then. So Muzzy, Hunterace, Firebat. That's my Hall of Fame inductees if we were to do it right now.
Okay. So I would definitely pick Muzzy because he's on track to win last call points 3 years in a row.
Yes, for his region.
If you have, that is just so hard to do.
Yeah,
that's a monumental.
You have to love Hearthstone
a lot.
You have
to like Hearthstone a lot, and also dislike other things about life a lot because you put Hearthstone as the number 1 and number 2, number 3 priorities, and then maybe,
all right, well that fits Muzzy
food,
very well.
Warmth and clothing. Number 4. Hunter-Ace, probably because, like you said, the streak is very difficult to ever break. I think this goes down in history as one of the most dominant periods ever in Hearthstone history. We have yet to see, but that's cool. The third one, I would actually award this to Pavel, because I think Pavel has done also. Before Hunter-Ace, Pavel had the most dominant streak in Hearthstone for a while. Not only did he win a tournament, a very difficult tournament, right after he won the World Championship, he also won Europe playoffs twice in 2017.
And then was 1 game away.
From
going back to a World Championship.
Yeah, multiple times. He almost got there in Winters when he lost to Doc Pone, and then he almost got there in Summer when he lost to Orange.
Yeah.
It's those guys both went on to the World Championship, and those players end up still doing well. The honorable mention, if I could cheat, would go to Kolenta, because I think he's also withstood the test of time. Every single year, Kolento's been a big threat, going deep runs, and he just had another deep run in C-Story Cup.
Top 4.
Yeah, and I'm just waiting for Kolenta once again to just figure out that he's bored enough to try for the World Championship really hard one time again, and then qualify for it, and then just relax for 6 months. I feel like, Kolento's like the Moses of Hearthstone, if you will.
Descend from the mountaintop.
Every now and then he descends from the mountaintop just to show us mere mortals how to play this kind of game. All right, so let's also check in with the team standings. We're talking about individual performances. Team standings have been tracked by a culmination of points for 3 individuals that you submit for your team. So if, for example, TalkStone were to submit a team, it'd be me, TJ, and whoever our third guest is. And our collective points would be our team standings. And team standings in general is very important because at the end of the season, which is 4 months, you get a payout depending on if you finished in top 10. And of course, number 1, getting a lot of money all the way to top 10. And this is a way for HCT to recognize the teams that are supporting the ecosystem. And it's really interesting to see how things have been shaken up, TJ.
How many points would we have, Dan?
We would have at least 4 points.
Have you hit Legend every season?
Yes.
We have 6 points.
We have 6 points.
There we go.
What's the team standing looking like, DJ?
The team standings is a seasonal thing that basically a team or an organization basically says these 3 players that are part of our organization are the 3 players that we're using for team standings for this season. At the end of the season, the 3-player teams that have earned the most points throughout that HCT season will get basically a cash payout. So it's just a reward, an incentive for players to be a part of organizations and to work together to earn HCT points to get additional money on top of what they're earning from playoff championships, tour stops, etc. And this is a recurring thing. It happens every season. And every season, organizations have a chance to change their members if they want to. They have a chance to, make a second team because organizations can have up to 2 teams participating.
Some of them do.
As noted by like Team Genji.
Team Genji.
Yep.
Or Mana Surge.
Mana Surge.
So right now, as of the live standings, and a shout out to Team Genji because they have a live standings page that you guys can help categorize stuff. So number 1 is F2K, Fate to Karma, with Board Control Glacier and Fino. Tempo Storm very close at their heels in number 2, which is Muzzy, Saiyan, and Amnesiac. Those 2, and even the top 3, Nordavin, are pretty solid. Like Nordavin is, of course, Hunterace and his squad. But Team Genji is also hot on their heels. And then after that is where it becomes really interesting, TJ. I think 1 to 4 are pretty set in their ways.
Yes.
I think what becomes interesting is 5 through 8 because they're all fairly close, and they all have a lot of room for improvement depending on their ladder finishes for this end of this month. So complexity, you have Tyler, Casey, and them, and you have SK with Bunny Hopper, Aqua Wonder, Red Reserve with Mitsuhide and Sidonia,
Yep.
Omni Slash at number 8 with Zalay, Ike, and Sivka. So
but where's Brian Kipler?
Brian Kipler is the substitute backup. So
he's currently earning caster points, which
is
an arbitrary system that we've created.
Yeah. But, how cool is that? Seeing, Omni Slash, which originally started off just as a team of, star content creators, some of your favorite personalities, are also fairly competitive.
Yeah.
So, and Planet On right behind them as well. And, Surrenders 6-0, of course, they got signed to a new team for SK Telecom. Huge news.
Yes.
So, I'm really looking forward to see how the bottom of the standings shape up. You have a lot of good teams in the running there. For 5 through 8, and I hope that has big implications in the future as well.
Yeah, and top 10 teams get the payouts.
Okay, yeah, correct.
I
was saying top 8, but it's top 8.
The top 8 are the closest, but then of course Helsinki Reds looks like they'll probably round that off in the top 10.
Finland on the map.
Yes, they are. And
Korea Tavaton.
Bless you.
Thank you.
That wraps up team standings, but you know what it's time for now, Dan.
What's it time for, TJ?
Meme history.
Today's meme history goes back to the very first expansion of Hearthstone, which was the Curse of Naxx Rammus adventure.
That's right. And the meme for this week is Naxx out.
Naxx is out.
Is Naxx out?
Or is Naxx out?
This is fitting because this podcast will be played about 7 hours after the final reveal stream for Boomsday. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there was a bunch of Naxx out being spammed.
Yes.
So some of you are coming to TalkStone being like, well, TJ and Frodan, why are people spamming Naxx out when it's Boomsday that's coming out? Naxx came out years ago. Well, we're going to give you a little bit of an introduction. So, Naxx Rammus, of course, the first adventure, the first additional content released for Hearthstone outside the Classic set. It was a really big deal. Players were waiting for it, anticipating it for months after it was announced, and it was delayed. The official release date, it was delayed because, who knows? I can't even remember back far then.
Hearthstone had just released
it. Had just officially released.
And it came with, iPad and Android, so there's a lot of challenges that people, that I know that's not really discussed about trying to multi-platform across all these games. Not necessarily even within Blizzard's control, things like syncing with the Apple Store versus Google Play versus a bunch of other brands.
Or, an influx of players into the servers.
Right, and it was the first time they ever did an expansion as well.
Yeah.
So it was very big learning experience.
Yeah, and at first it started as people would go into streams, say Kripparrian, and say, is Naxx out? Asking the other players in the chat. And eventually devolved to players trolling other players in Twitch streams, saying that Naxx is out, and everybody would start spamming it, and alas, everybody would go open up Hearthstone, and Naxx would not be out. And so it just caught on and became a thing. And so now every time there's a new set, a new expansion released or announced, lo and behold,
Yeah. Or
Naxx is out.
when the year of the Kraken was introduced and Curse of Naxx rotated out.
Yes.
Naxx was out again.
Naxx was out again in a different way,
Yes.
but Naxx was out again.
That's right. And then when they put the Wild Adventures and expansions on the Blizzard store,
Naxx was out again.
Naxx is out yet again. The meme lives on every 2 years or so. So basically in 2019, there's going to be some way to make that joke and it be relevant.
It's the meme that keeps on giving.
So invest into Naxx out stocks. Buy the dip. And just wait for that thing to skyrocket. To the moon, boys.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm a little bit bullish on Naxx memes because they're out in full force.
That's right. We get a lot of death rattles for Boomsday. So,
Yeah.
Naxx is out as a reincarnation of sorts.
And as always, Dan, meme history is here to serve as a way to make the Hearthstone community a more inclusive place for us all.
Now it's time for the well-played moment. Every episode, we're going to pick a moment that stands out from the competitive scene, a moment that was
Well played.
Yes. And this week is kind of an assortment of moments. But
We're going to break the rule again. Last week we did a well-played player, and this week we're going to do a well-played match, but also a well-played player, but also a few well-played moments.
Right. So why don't you go first, TJ? It's from the same series. It's Machamp versus Pleb, and really funny name, by the way. Shout out to them. It was a Japan versus Japan match happening in the top 8, I believe, of HCT Tokyo.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight, we talked about it earlier, Machamp just played exceptionally well, and this match was one of the ones that stood out in my mind. There was a specific moment from a Shutterwalk Shaman versus Hunter game, where Machamp had basically all of his combo pieces of Shutterwalk already played, so he was just waiting to draw Shutterwalk, and his hand was basically empty. And he had Hagatha active, so he was basically drawing a few minions off the top and trying to, bide his time until Shutterwalk was to come into play. With the random spells that he was generating a few minions. Pleb had Deathstalker Rexar online, so he was trying to just pile on as much pressure as possible. He was offered Arthas as one of his choices, and of course he picked it knowing that Machamp did not have Shutterwalk yet.
Right, because he would have played it.
Because he would have played it. The potential for Death Grip was probably on his mind when picking Arthas. Now, one of the randomly generated spells from Machamp was Cryostasis, which is freeze a minion and give it +3/+3, which is very hard to find uses for. And there was a moment where Machamp drew Lightning Storm and had a full clear on the board, a 2-health Arthas and a bunch of 2-health other minions on the board. Full clear available. Just Lightning Storm, boom. You're no more pressure. But instead, he Cryostasis the Arthas to bring it up to 5 health, then Lightning Storm to freeze it but keep it alive. Because Machamp knew that the only way that he loses this game, or one of the only ways, was if he never draws Shutterwalk, or if Arthas got Death Grip, the 1-6 for that Death Knight card, and Death Grip the Shutterwalk from his deck because it was one of his only minions remaining. And so it was just a really unique spot that not a lot of players would have gone for. They would have said, well, the chances that he'd get Death Grip from this are just low, so I'm just going to clear the board, try and protect my life total, and hope that I draw Shutterwalk. But this was really a way to keep pressure on the board, but maximize the potential for winning the game based off of what was left in his deck. And I just thought it was a brilliantly played maneuver. Next turn, or 2 turns later, he ended up getting Earthshock from a random minion from Hagatha to be able to deny the Death Knight card from Arthas. But just love that play.
Yeah, I think when you're playing a really intense game of Hearthstone with things like Shutterwalk, you have to, when you have inevitability on your side, you have to make sure to cut out every possible out from your opponent. So good recognition of the situation, denying your opponent the ability to draw Death Grip, as long as you can, because he stalled them for a couple turns.
Yeah.
Really well done. My well-played moment from Machamp versus Pleb actually came, I think, the game before with Quest Rogue versus Odd Paladin. And that's a really hard matchup to win as the Quest Rogue. It's very, very difficult because of how much pressure they put on you. I mean, a lot of them don't run any ways to clear them very easily. Maybe you have a Fan of Knives, maybe you don't, but that's pretty much the only way you can answer it. And the reason why I picked this as a well-played moment is because the thing that makes me the happiest the most when I play Hearthstone is when I'm rewarded for having foresight many turns in advance. And Machamp had a lot of turns where he could have used a resource but chose not to because he knew that he needed to play to the top of his deck because of how bad of a matchup it is.
Yeah.
So an example is he had a Vicious Scalehide on board with a Sonya in hand that survived. So he could have played Sonya, start trading Vicious Scalehide, get more Vicious Scalehides to rush the board and clear it, gain some life back, and have the quest completed because he would have had 2 in the hand, and then just wait for a single bouncer, which is very reasonable. Wait for a Youthful Brewmaster, wait for a Shadow Step, wait for Advantage because he was at 5 mana or 4 mana. Makes total sense. He even had preparation. Chose not to do it. Held, drew his second Vicious Scalehide, was able to be rewarded for it. He also had a chance when he completed the quest to use preparation and then play Stone Tusk Boar and get more tempo, but he chose not to preparation, which he needed to later on in order to preparation out Mimic Pods and Fan of Knives, both of his preps, to get the Wax Elemental to stabilize for exact health count and for the exact mana usage.
Yes.
That kind of stuff, people look at the Wax Elemental and think, man, Machamp just got bailed out by his decks and top deck. But look, he laid so much foundation to give himself wiggle room to play to those outs if he needed it. In case he didn't draw a better card, by the way, during that entire process, because he drew Novice Engineer, Mimic Potted another Novice Engineer. It was a really complicated turn.
Yeah.
But that kind of stuff, in my opinion, is what really makes Hearthstone rewarding at that point. Because the payoff isn't necessarily when you play Wild Growth into Nourish into Master Go Hard, because a lot of people can do that.
Yeah.
It's about when you have that amazing 5-turn, 6-turn foresight to see how the game could pan out and what are ways to win from that position in a matchup you're extremely unfavored in. And that, TJ, is why it was well played.
Yeah, I agree. 8 times out of 10, he loses that matchup.
Right.
And he recognizes that. And so he plays risky to play to the top of his deck to give him the out. He could have maybe, stabilized a little bit instead of losing control of the board at 4 health like he did and was able to get it back with the preps. He could have lost control of the board at like 12 health, but he would have lost control of the board in a state that he would never be able to come back. But instead he waits, tries to play to his very few outs to win the game that he could, and limited those odds to where he loses only 6 out of 10 instead of 8 out of 10 of the times.
And gets rewarded.
And gets rewarded for that. So I agree, Dan. That moment was very well played. You know what else is well played? This promo.
Oh, hi there.
My favourite moment from last year's HGG
Was when Amnesiac wearing all-American clothing at the finals.
When New Zealand beat Australia.
when the Philippines beat Germany.
Well played!
What's my favourite number?
30.
30.
30. Pasta? Yeah, definitely 30. And the pizza.
My 30 favourite card?
That's too much.
You what, mate? 30 cards right now?
I have to play.
The Global Games are all about
National pride.
Team spirit.
Cheering for Germany.
great community of friends and family.
For your winners, Czech Republic.
This year, Czech Republic doesn't stand a chance against Sweden.
They don't even stand a chance.
Spain has a really good chance to beat them this time.
What makes the US such great Hearthstone players?
Playing smart.
French players love to play different decks.
What does Belgian Hearthstone players have in common?
Pride?
To the Global Games!
Welcome back to TalkStone, everybody, and that promo off of HGG. Why not have Drew HGGB in the studio? What's up, Drew?
Hey, Dan. Good to be here.
Yeah, Drew Higbee, of course, product manager of Hearthstone Esports. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, what you do, and also tell us what Hearthstone deck you've been playing lately.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'm Drew Higbee. I'm on the Hearthstone Esports team. I'm a product manager on the Hearthstone Esports team, one of a few. I work a lot on Hearthstone Championship Tour with tour stops, with broadcasting the Hearthstone Championship Tour, as well as Hearthstone Global Games in very close conjunction with my colleagues over in our Europe office. And currently, I've been playing probably the most Warlock, mostly even Warlock, I think.
Dan, even Warlock is so 3 days ago.
That's right. It's all about odd Warlock.
Keep up with the times,
To
Drew.
be fair, I did play Battle for Azeroth over the weekend, like pre-patch stuff.
Pre-patch?
So that was like 3 days.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm pretty behind.
I'm glad you somehow pulled yourself away from the PC to join us here.
Before we move on, I just want to point out that out of my time at Blizzard, I have never seen someone send more efficient emails than Drew Higbee. He's the most efficient email sender out of anybody at Blizzard, or at least on the Hearthstone Esports team.
So, Drew, this is the second year of Hearthstone Global Games, and last year it was pretty successful, I would say. What were some of the lessons learned that carried on to second year here in 2018?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of good lessons to learn from 2017 to 2018. We tried to put as many of them in place as possible. I think one of the big things is we had round-robin group play last year in the initial rounds, which I think is very successful in watching who comes out of the groups. There's like a lot of storyline around who makes it to the top of the group. Right. But I think in Hearthstone, looking at a field of teams or players, Swiss is very useful for that. And I think the other thing that Swiss affords us this year that we didn't have last year is you see some of the biggest countries, most successful countries, and hitting each other much earlier. So, for example, like you see crazy games in week 1, week 2 of global games that you just didn't see last year. You didn't see China versus USA right off the bat last year. So I think there's a lot to be said for playing through a Swiss tournament. It also affords us the opportunity to condense the content a little bit, so players are able to, coordinating 190 plus players across the world in all these different time zones and things like that is very difficult. So the less weeks that you have that many players playing that, I think is useful. And in global games this year, after you're to 3 losses, you're out of the tournament, which allows for smoother operations for everybody. It lets us iterate a little bit faster. It lets us help out with communications and making sure schedules work better for players. A lot of these players, as they're this year the top competitive point earners from their countries, have a very packed schedule, traveling to tour stops, traveling to playoffs, traveling to championships, all those types of things. And I think this condensed schedule, assists a lot more for those players. I also think that last year we launched, we brought up some different features on our website that I think helped improve the viewing experience and understanding and following the global games. This year we've gone back and revisited the entire thing. We've actually never had a Swiss tournament displayed on the Hearthstone Esports page. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but that's something that we just launched this last week. So you can actually see all the standings with the tiebreakers, with the schedule, with everything based on the hour that matches are intended to be played at. Sometimes, as we all know, games run long or things like that. 2.5-hour matches between countries do happen. So that's really exciting. You can check that out on playhearthstone.com/esports and click on the Global Games tab. You can click on the schedule, find everything there. It's really interesting. It actually has the VODs from each of the matches that we're playing so many matches that some of them have to be off stream. All of those VODs are up within 24 hours. So if there's a country that you really, really wanted to see, country or region that you missed on broadcast, because they were playing off in the background, the score is going to be there for you. You can hide the score so it's not spoiled, and then you can click on the VOD and watch the entire match, which I think is really, really awesome. It also affords us the opportunity for a lot of countries. I think there's a lot of casters that are looking to break into the scene that don't have a lot of top-tier content that hasn't already been cast over. So when you looking at Hearthstone Championship Tour, someone could go recast one of the playoff matches that, Frodan and Kibler casted over, but do you really want to compare yourself against Frodan and Kibler the first time you're casting?
No.
Yeah. You don't. As somebody who used to try and cast StarCraft games, I would go to the MLG team and I would reach out. They had a whole system in place that you could reach out to cast some of the games that were, the initial rounds where there's just so many games going on. They would send you the replay and you could cast it. We invite people to do that here. We have all these matches. If you're interested in casting over some of these matches, please reach out to us at hearthstoneadmin@blizzard.com. We'll work with you to try and get you the VODs, and we're really excited about reaching out and finding new talent for our casting pool. There's a lot of Hearthstone. There's a lot to be casted. So very excited about that too.
How do you pull something off of this magnitude? There's a lot of countries that speak, basically their own unique languages outside of a few popular ones like Spanish and English and maybe Chinese. And it's like you have your own difficulties, and they're all different time zones. Like
24 matches a week across 48 different countries, across 12 different language broadcasts and time zones, across 3 different broadcasts at 3 different start times.
You have to listen to 6 British casters. I mean, it just
and
really
6
wears
British casters. No, it's definitely from an executional standpoint, Hearthstone Global Games is a very difficult thing to pull off. I think definitely want to give a lot of shout out to all the various people who work on Hearthstone Global Games to make it happen. There's so much work behind the scenes that not everyone gets to see. And there's a lot of community feedback that we're obviously always listening to. Sometimes it's hard to understand how much is going on in the background and how that affects what you're seeing on the front end. Like TJ said, when you're organizing 48 countries, each of which have 4 players,
Right.
so you're organizing like 190-something players every single week to play in games. There's people traveling for personal reasons. There's, days off, country holidays that you may not account for, where everyone in the country is just they don't do things on that day. So we, big shout out to our production partner ESL, who's also helping admin a lot of it in conjunction with us, because we do a lot of effort to make sure that all those schedules work every week. Sometimes, regretfully, we can't put something on broadcast because there's only so many broadcast hours that we can do before our 6 British casters pass out. So big shout outs to them, of course, as they're working very hard, 10 to 12-hour days of broadcast. And as we all know, there's a lot behind the scenes of each day of broadcast that you do before you even get on air, and even after. So it's a lot of coordination, but the way we do it is, I think everyone who works on Hearthstone Esports and our production partners are legitimately very passionate about making Hearthstone Esports really well received, appropriate for the players, trying to make sure everyone has the best experience possible. And I think we're all very committed to that. So honestly, I've been at Blizzard almost 9 years. In 3 weeks, I'll be at Blizzard 9 years. And
almost done.
Yeah. Hey, at 10 years, I get a ball and shield. So
yeah, and then you're done.
The shield is pretty cool.
Actually, the rewards, because they're starting to make more rewards for people who've been here for like 25 years.
Right.
Now.
The people that have been here since the
beginning.
beginning.
It's pretty epic. You just go to the museum. So I highly suggest you guys check it out. Drew, let's say I'm a really passionate fan or player, and I have some feedback to give. Who's like really leading the charge here for HGG? And like how if people want to like talk about it to some, because I feel like I've seen some people like submit suggestions, but they're like tweeting at Play Hearthstone when they're like talking about the new expansion. Like I don't feel like that's like the way to communicate here.
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely interesting to see the communication channels people try to reach you through. Got one
my
on,
DMs.
Yeah,
right.
TJ's DMs are fantastic.
DMs.
I got one on Instagram once. I was like, how did you? There's like 4 people.
They like
who
hit up
follow
your
me.
MySpace.
First of all, how did you know who I was?
Yeah. But no, I think there's a lot of appropriate channels to reach out to us too. The Hearthstone Esports Twitter DM is open, so messaging there. There's also, I would say, the most appropriate contact method is hearthstoneadmin@blizzard.com. We all on the Hearthstone Esports team have access to that, and we're compiling feedback from those. That is also literally the best form of communication because you have it all written down. It's appropriately addressed to any one of us can have access to that, and we can forward it around to the appropriate parties that need that information.
Oh yeah, and now that you said that email out in public, I'm sure all those weight loss spam emails will definitely not clog your inbox. Now that it's out there. I want to circle back and actually ask one thing here. The format is really cool for HGG. And you guys are also experimenting a lot since last year as well. Is this kind of like something that you guys are happy about, like specifically with team formats, or do you think there's even room for perhaps individual competitions to have some basis like a pick ban system or something very crazy like that? Because it's led to some amazing diversity. You see a lot of interesting every class is being played, and a lot of different choices. It's not just like uniform, everyone bans Warlock, everyone bans Druid.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's a really interesting thing when we're looking at tournament formats, match formats, all of those things. We're always looking for new ways to highlight people's skill, competitive skill, players' individual choices. We want individual player choice to matter a lot. We want teams' skill to shine through. As always, it's always a process. You're not going to hit everything 100%. You can't find the best skill testing format without playing through it. If you play through a format and you find 1 or 2 things that you can improve, you improve it for the next time. I think we've done it with a few different things throughout the years, and we always look forward to player feedback in any of these scenarios. But I think we've been blessed with a really healthy meta, and I think the game team has done a really great job. They made appropriate changes partway through Witchwood to kind of bring some classes more in line with other ones. And I think even at Summer Champs, we had almost every single class. Represented.
Every class represented, and also no class was 100% represented. So.
And 8 classes were banned.
8 classes were banned.
That's pretty crazy.
Most diversity we've ever seen. Yeah, in fact, this actually brings us to our next segment. Would you buy this format? Sorry, this actually is an inside joke. This is kind of like a bonus meme history. Something that we like to do when we talked to Drew in the past was a lot of the HCT casters would bounce format ideas off of Drew, and he loved exploring this. So, whatever Drew Higbee's Twitter is, if you guys have an idea for a really interesting Hearthstone format, I'm sure Drew would definitely read your idea.
We actually spend a lot of time in the office talking theory crafting and brainstorming formats. We have a giant whiteboard in our pod that probably gets used every day. A lot of times it's nonsense. It gets erased right away because it's just the most ridiculous thing in the world. But we brainstorm a lot of ideas for formats and for if we had no restrictions, if we could make the craziest format possible, what would it be? So formats is one thing that I'm very passionate about. I know Drew is too, because
100%.
Drew's the guy that I bounce all my dumb ideas off of.
There's a lot of ideas that come from TJ. You guys only hear about maybe 1% of the things that TJ says.
I wish we could dedicate a segment to that.
The 1% is the good stuff, though. The 99% is the bad stuff.
That's what they want from this podcast, to be honest. They want the insights. People, results from HCT Tokyo. They can look that up themselves. They can see the point standings of teams. We really want to hear TJ's bad ideas. That's what we're here for.
I'm trying to think of my craziest bad idea.
Ooh, you've had a lot.
How about the most recent bad idea that is notable?
It's not format related, but I created a pretty in-depth plan for a caster reality show.
Oh yeah, that was the thing.
Okay,
it was going to be pretty cool.
This affects me directly, so I'm curious.
Think Amazing Race, but the prize is you get to cast the World Championship Finals.
Oh, okay. So we do it in duos. So it's me and Kibler versus you and Admirable.
You do it in duos, but it's not HCT casters. It's new casters.
Oh, okay.
So it would
fly them into a tour stop.
It would replace the
give them an
you
envelope.
can cast competition, and it would just be like you apply. We choose a bunch of duos, and then you play in
that's cool.
An Amazing Race style section of challenges.
Imagine 24 caster pairs all competing, flown into a location, and whoever actually reaches the tour. We don't tell them where the venue is.
Well, that's really cool. Because you can do the Amazing Race style, but theme it after the Hearthstone expansion. So they actually have to go to a jungle for Ungoro to figure out, and then they have to go to a volcano for Blackrock.
These sound like my ideas.
Yeah.
We need to invite Dan for the next one of these sessions.
The statistical likelihood that only 2 people physically survive the challenge, they'll just cast.
Yeah.
There was another one.
You only need your mouth to cast if they're missing limbs.
There was another one that was, I called it the most skill-testing Hearthstone format possible, which was a completely open tournament, so any player of any skill level can enter. So like HCT. The most advertised tournament ever. Well, HCT, but there's a cap on 256. There's no qualifier. No cap, no nothing. 27 rounds of Swiss.
So HCT.
27 rounds of Swiss and you only cut it in half. And then you play a double elimination bracket from there.
TJ, have you seen the breaks for a 9-round Swiss tournament? You want to triple that.
We did the math, and that tournament would take 3 weeks of nonstop 12-hour broadcast to complete.
World Series of Hearthstone, I'm down.
A lot of content.
Yeah.
I mean, look.
There's more, but that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. Look, we have a lot of bad ideas, but there's only one that we want to ask you, Drew. Is would you buy this deck?
All right.
So another one of TJ's bad ideas. Yep. It's a guest segment that we do with all of our, fancy cameo appearances here on TalkStone. So this is a relatively affordable deck, but the problem is it has a lot of cards that you probably don't play. TJ calls this a Spectral Pillager OTK.
Yes. Okay. So this deck, Drew, I'm looking for a 2,000 dust investment for 20% stake in my deck. The total deck, my math is off, but the total deck cost of this deck is 8,680. So, about average price for a Tier 1 deck, which I think we could plop this into Tier 1. You guys can be the judge of it. Full credit for this one goes to Mark MCKZ, who posted this deck on Hearthstone a few weeks ago, and I was scanning.
That's where I go to get all my decks.
That's where I go to get all my Tier 1 decks.
He's a registered user, so he knows he's good.
Yes, he knows what he's talking about. It's basically, it is a OTK. The full combo is 32 damage. So outside of armor, this will kill opponent through taunts because you're using Spectral Pillager, which reads, I have to mouse over it. Deal damage equal to the number of other cards you've played this turn.
It's a combo effect, too.
It is a
That's
combo effect.
interesting.
It's not a battle cry. All right. So the full combo is you play Sonya Shadow Dancer.
Okay.
Then you coin twice. You have 2 coins because you play the spell Wanted, which deals 3 damage to a minion. And if it kills that minion, it gives you a coin. Then you play Double Preparation.
Right.
You're not comboing them with anything. You just double prep. Then you play Spectral Pillager, so that's the first one. It deals 5 damage. Then you Doomerang your Pillager. Oh, I forgot to mention, you have to have a 5 or more attack dagger.
Right.
So you play 2 Deadly Poisons and Kingsbane to
try
and
like
At
a
some
Shadow
point
Blade or
before
something.
this.
yeah. So you're trying to make sure that happens. Then, because you played Sonya, you get a 1/1 copy of Spectral Pillager in your hand. You play it again. That deals 7 damage. Then you backstab that Spectral Pillager, which gives you another 1/1 Spectral Pillager. You play it again, deals 9 damage. You backstab that one again, which gives you another one. That deals 11 damage. Total combo, 32 damage. 9 cards.
Full hand?
9 cards.
9. Yeah, so basically a full hand.
Basically a full hand. You have to have 9 cards plus a 5 attack dagger.
Right.
Yeah, I'd buy it.
Yes!
Yeah, so one of the things that I actually love about Hearthstone is insane, ridiculous OTKs like this. I know at Summer Championships I sat and we tried to come up with, well, we like to call it the most insane OTKs that we can think of. And I believe there was a Farsighted Grumble Leroy OTK.
That was
we were
on Would You
talking
Buy
about.
This Deck?
That was
the first Would You Buy This Deck?
So that one,
Yeah.
that was a lot of interesting discussion.
But this one, Drew, can go through taunts.
Yeah, no, I like this one more because it goes through taunts, and I like Rogue more than I like Shaman because I think Rogue is a very skill-testing class. I think the reason why you don't see it as much on ladder as you do in tournaments is because it requires a lot of forethought to really, really do very, very well with Rogue.
Drew, you need about 110% forethought.
Yes, it requires
for this
a lot
deck.
of thought, or actually no thought.
One or the other.
To play this.
So,
but, what's up, TJ? Go ahead.
I was just gonna. Drew opted in to buy this deck before he even heard my overall win rate with it.
Yeah, actually.
I
that should
don't
be,
even know the win rate.
That should be the second component of it. If you can guess how many games it took for TJ to get a win with this deck, then you will be handsomely rewarded.
I don't remember how many it took me to get a win, but I played 26 games total with this deck.
How many games do you think he won?
How many do you think I won out of 26
7
games? I wish. I won a single game.
TJ.
Out of 26.
That is, wait, what rank were you when you were playing?
I tanked from around 1,200 Legend.
Okay.
So 1,200 Legend
Uh-huh.
to 5,700 Legend.
Mhm.
I am now at the point in my Legend rankings where I play against rank 3, rank 4 players because they have similar MMR to me.
Right.
And I gain about 12 points a win because I just lost so many games.
How would you know if you don't win?
Well, I start.
That one time he did win.
I stopped playing different decks after that, and I just gave up because I was never going to.
You mean you playing Future? Would you buy this deck?
Yes. Actually, it's hard because actually on the next Would You Buy This deck, it's going to be Boomsday.
Ooh, that will actually be very exciting.
Fun fact.
Is it? Wow.
Yeah, so this is the last Would You Buy This?
That's right. That's right.
I'm so sad. I put my last Would You Buy This deck as Spectral Pillager.
There's
OTK
a lot
Rogue.
of really.
Wow, I should have thought one out more.
Yeah. I should have put a lot more thought into this.
Yeah.
But also, I would buy this deck because I own almost every single one of these cards, besides Kingsbane. I think. I don't think I have Kingsbane. But Blood Mage Thalanos, I feel like at this point in Hearthstone history, if you don't own Blood Mage Thalanos, it's like you either didn't play the first 2 years of Hearthstone, or you're not playing. Well, I guess he's using far less decks now, but in the first 2 years of Hearthstone,
I don't know.
He's just
he's
a solid.
He's
craft.
solid.
pretty much
yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
If you're gonna craft one legendary to play across pretty much every single deck, he's
Blood
up
Mage
there.
Thalanos is safe.
Thanos is
Yeah.
good in Miracle Rogue. I've seen even Paladins play it just because it helps with their
Avenging
their
Wrath
cycle,
or Consecration or Cycle.
Right.
It's a solid card.
But yeah, this deck basically runs just all removal and card draw, and then that combo. The hardest part for getting the combo off for me was emptying my hand enough to make room for
all
the cards
9.
of the combo.
Yeah, that's what I was
because
thinking too.
imagine you have 8 pieces of the combo, and you have 10 cards left.
I play Druid. Oh, yeah.
And you have 10 cards left. You have to empty a card out of your hand every turn to try and make room for that one last combo piece that you need. So I'm like sapping.
And then they naturalize them.
Yeah.
You just overdraw.
Overdraw. Done.
So I'm like eviscerating 1/1s and trying to like get rid of charges for my Kingsbane so I can get the Cavern Shiny Finder out of my hand for value.
There's got to be a way to make it more efficient. We'll figure it out.
I tried. It's really tough because that's the only way you can deal over 30 damage is with that exact combo.
Yeah.
You can do things like prep Eviscerate plus Doomerang for 1 damage if you can't get a 5-attack dagger. But it's difficult. But it was fun. It was fun trying to get the combo off because the one time that I did, and granted, that win rate is a little bit skewed because there were games that I could have won without doing the combo that I chose to wait to try and do the combo to win.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I feel like...
But, so, like, there was games where I probably could have had a guaranteed win, but didn't because I wanted to try and get the combo off. So... but it was really fun. The one time that I did get the full combo off, my opponent was probably flabbergasted. He thought it was Kingsbane Rogue. And there was another game that I won that didn't count because I started off, I played Cavern Shiny Finder on turn 2, Kingsbane Double Deadly Poison on turn 3, Leeching Poison on turn 4. My opponent conceded because he thought it was Kingsbane Rogue. And I can't remember what deck
you were technically.
Technically,
at that point.
He didn't realize that my hand was like double Witchwood Piper Spectral Pillager. So that I didn't count that win.
Does
so.
Valyra the Hollow go in this deck?
No room.
No room. But just
the Shadow Reflection
it's just such
fills
a tight
up your hand.
deck list, yeah.
Right, but then it means you need one less coin.
No, because there's a lot of
Or
cards.
one less prep.
Yeah, but a lot of cards are.
But you have to prep something, then that card's the last copy of your Shadow Reflection, so you can't double prep. You can double coin though.
You could, but I just think it makes it too awkward because there's an extra card in your hand during those times where you're trying to find the last card.
But it also helps you survive. TJ, just try it. It literally can't get worse than 1 in 26.
Dan,
TJ.
I will tell you, I'm never playing a single game of this deck again.
Dan, don't worry. Since I am buying this deck, I now have
you
to
can
play
inherit
this.
It.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
All right. Well, we're 2 for 3 on would you buy this decks now?
Yeah, I think we should spice up the segment a little bit for next time because it feels like our guests are sometimes just entertaining us for the show. But
whoa, I would legitimately play this deck.
We should put real dust on the line.
Yes.
Have them open their Hearthstone collection on the broadcast and craft it right then and there. So there's consequences.
Or maybe we can reward them. You know, if they can guess how much the dust it is, for example, then they get some free packs from us to craft towards it.
Do I still get the color, legendary?
Maybe.
Oh yeah,
We'll
then I could definitely guess the dust amount.
Maybe we'll see. I mean, we'll tell you some cards, and you have to guess the dust amount. I think that makes it kind of fun.
Yeah, that would be fun.
And then maybe you can compensate you handsomely. I have one last question for you, Drew, to wrap up this segment and the show. We talked very briefly about a Hearthstone Hall of Fame, and we picked 3 players. And Drew, you've been with Hearthstone Esports since pretty much the beginning. Who would be your 3 Hall of Famers if it were to induct today?
I think my number 1 would definitely be Muzzy. The man has dedicated the last 3 years of his life to Hearthstone.
Good choice.
I mean, he was playing before that, but absolutely dedicated, top point earner for Americas every year. Mm-hmm. That's an insane accomplishment. Very, very insane accomplishment. I agree with Firebat. He had a time where he was easily the best player in the world, and he made the most out of, I think, of his world championship of any player that has become world champion.
Okay.
The third one I think is very difficult. I think there is a very strong case to be made for Hunterace currently. There was obviously a case for Pavel. Pavel's win rate in major tournaments at the time that he won world championship and tournaments shortly thereafter, leading into winter champs and things like that, was an insane mid 60s win rate, low 60s win rate, which is in a game like Hearthstone was very, very impressive. So I think either of those are good choices. There's a case for a few others, but I think if I had a top 10, it'd be very easy to pick out 10 players.
Oh, yeah.
Top 3, I think, is where it becomes very difficult.
I was waiting for Drew to just be like, but honestly, I just have to give it to Kriparian.
Yeah.
I could tell Drew wanted to.
No, Drew is pretty,
with all of his heart.
Drew is pretty diehard for some of the players who have done really well. You know, another player I think deserves a big mention is Tom 6229, because even though he won the World Championship in 2017, which people might tone, he went to the World Championships
in 2014
and also was the last call second place finisher one of the years between that.
Yeah.
So this guy has also been in it for a while.
And I think the only person that was on the Hearthstone Esports team in 2014 when Tom participated the last time that is still on the Hearthstone Esports team today is Drew.
That's right. We talk about the most consistent people in Hearthstone.
Yeah. Consequently, the person who voted for Tom for world champion.
Yeah.
Huh.
We hear
So a Blizzard person who
Hey.
voted for someone to be the world champion ended up winning it.
when we look at only one. I was the only one who voted for Tom.
Yeah,
but
to
I
be fair,
think,
I voted for Muzzy.
Yeah, I think, to briefly touch on that, the game team talks about the various players that they vote for, reels, and I think and all of them have little fun-natured, I'm this many for this many. Kibler talks about this many for this many.
Yes.
We're all players. We're all viewers. We all enjoy watching Hearthstone unless we wouldn't be making it. We wouldn't be making Hearthstone Esports. But yeah, no, I think it was very interesting. In 2017, I felt like it was really the year that Asia Pacific really stepped into its own, and I think Tom, in perfect embodiment of that, did a fantastic job last year.
It's at the end of 2017, and it's gonna wrap up at the end of 2018. That's my prediction, Drew. I think APAC is gonna show what it's made of. Taiwan and Korea have done it for a while now, and I think Japan's gonna rise up.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah. That's about it for us today. TJ, it's been a great episode. I want to thank our guest, Drew Higbee, for stopping by, talking about HCG, Hearthstone, and just, who his Hall of Fame inductees would be. Very interesting discussions. Drew, are we going to ever, see where you're going to be up next at all? Because I feel like we don't really see you public-facing very often.
I'm a little bit more behind the scenes, but upcoming we have obviously the playoffs coming up in September, so there's a bunch of work in the background going on for that. Every week we're doing a lot of work in the background for Hearthstone Global Games. But as far as catching me at an event or anything like that, it probably won't be till after playoffs. Probably Champs will probably be the next time.
If you want to catch Drew on screen again, what you can do is go on YouTube and search his old StarCraft VODs. Drew used to be a StarCraft caster.
He did.
Community one back in the day.
I used to actually stream Hearthstone every single night.
That's right.
And I streamed. I was working on the Blizzard customer support team back then, so I had a shift that ended at 3 a.m. Texas time.
Dang.
So when I started streaming, it was actually right when it was actually good viewership time for Europe. So I actually had a decent amount of viewers just because Europeans didn't have anyone catering to them at all at that time at the very, very beginning. So, I've been around in esports for a long time. I really enjoy it. So
yeah,
I've been trying to convince
back when
him.
Drew still had color in his eyes.
There's color there, probably.
I've been trying to convince him to cast Hearthstone again, but he prefers the creating of the esports as opposed to the casting of the esports now.
There you go. TJ, what about you? When are we going to see you next? Dude, your baby's due soon.
My baby is due any day now.
Yeah.
Literally any day. There's a chance that we record this podcast about a day and a half before it goes live. There's a chance that in the time between now and the time this podcast goes live that my baby will be born.
There's a chance that during the podcast the baby is born.
There's a chance.
There was a phone call that TJ did not answer during the podcast.
Yikes.
All right.
Let's wrap this thing up, man.
I looked. It was not my wife.
Oh, we're good.
Okay. That's why I have my phone here to see. But he has not been born in the time that we've been recording this podcast, but it's possible. I'll still be catching up. I'll still be on TalkStone. I'm close by. I'll be watching a couple tour stops. We have Germany and Taichung, both coming up in August. And then, of course, I'll make my return after my paternity leave for playoffs in the first week of September, as Drew talked about. So what about you, Dan?
So the next time you might see me, some upcoming cool events in August. They haven't been announced yet, so I don't want to jump the gun. But there's definitely some really sweet stuff happening soon. Other than that, you'll just see me making terrible decks and posting on social media and trying to farm as many likes and retweets as possible at Frodan. Thanks, everyone, for listening. You can find more episodes of TalkStone every other week here at 6 p.m. Pacific, twitch.tv/playhearthstone. If you guys want to check out the audio podcast, we post them at SoundCloud, iTunes, and Google as well. And if you guys, of course, want to check out all the news we're talking about, any of the analysis, playhearthstone.com/esports for your hub for all things competitive Hearthstone. That does it for us this week. We'll see you guys next time in the tavern.